I am Haley, 30 years old now, but the memory of that night 17 years ago still haunts me. My parents abandoned me at a gas station 60 miles from home when I was just 13, telling me to woman up and find my own way back. I slept behind a dumpster that night, terrified and alone. After that, I cut all contact with them, determined never to speak to them again. Then last week, I received my brother Jason's wedding invitation with an unexpected note inside from my parents. Before I dive into my story, I would love to know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments, hit the like button, and subscribe to hear more stories of survival and healing like mine. Growing up in rural Pennsylvania in a middle-class family, I always felt like I was walking on eggshells. Our modest two-story house on Maple Street looked perfect from the outside, with its white picket fence and well-maintained garden, but inside those walls was a different story altogether. My father, Derek, worked as an accountant at a local firm. He was tall, with a perpetual frown that seemed etched into his face. His expectations were impossibly high, and his approval was something I desperately craved, but rarely received. Haley, why can you not be more like your brother became the soundtrack of my childhood. Every report card, every school project, every attempt at a hobby was met with criticism and comparison. A-Jason always got straight, As, or your piano recital was okay. But remember how Jason won that competition when he was your age? My mother, Stephanie, worked part-time as a dental hygienist, but her main job seemed to be enabling my father's harsh parenting. She would stand by silently while he berated me occasionally, offering a week. Your father just wants what is best for you after he had stormed off. She was beautiful but vacant. Somehow, like she had long ago, surrendered her own voice and identity to keep the peace. Then there was my brother Jason, 5 years older, and the golden child of the family. He excelled at everything, academics, sports, making friends, and seemed blissfully unaware of how his achievements were weaponized against me. I did not blame him. He was just as much a product of our dysfunctional family as I was just on the favorable end of the spectrum. I was the sensitive one, more artistic than athletic, more contemplative than competitive. I loved reading and drawing activities that were often dismissed as wasting time by my father. Books will not get you into a good college. Haley, he would say, snatching novels from my hands and replacing them with math workbooks. Our extended family lived about 60 miles away in Harrisburg. My Aunt Laura, my father's sister, was cut from the same judgmental cloth. Her husband, Tom, and their 2 perfect children completed the picture of the family I was constantly told I should aspire to be like. The only person who truly saw me was my grandmother, Barbara, my mother's mother. She lived about 20 minutes away, and visits to her cozy apartment were my sanctuary. You are exactly who you are meant to be, sweetheart, she would tell me, her soft hands cupping my face. She was the one person who hung my artwork on her refrigerator and asked me about the books I was reading with genuine interest. In the weeks leading up to the incident, tensions in our household had been mounting. I had received a B in math on my 7th grade report card, prompting a week-long cold shoulder from my father. My mother had found sketches in my notebook instead of class notes, resulting in the confiscation of my art supplies. My brother Jason had just been accepted to a prestigious summer program, setting the bar even higher for my perceived underachievement. The morning arguments had become longer, the silent dinners more suffocating. Even Jason had started to notice shooting me sympathetic glances across the table when our parents were not looking. Just do what they say, Haley, he whispered to me one night after a particularly harsh criticism session about my attitude problem. It is easier that way. But conforming had never been easy for me. I tried to shrink myself to mold into their expectations, but something in me resisted being extinguished. I would nod and promise to try harder, then retreat to my room where I would write stories and draw in hidden notebooks, creating worlds where I was accepted just as I was. The Friday before the incident, I had called my grandmother in tears after my father had torn up a poem I had written for a school assignment, calling it melodramatic nonsense. She had sighed deeply. Your father has his own demons, Haley. That does not make his behavior right, but someday you will understand better. Just know that I am always here for you. I had no idea then just how soon I would need to take her up on that promise, or how completely my life was about to change. The carefully constructed facade of our family was about to crack wide open, revealing the rot that had been growing beneath the surface all along. and I would be the one left picking up the pieces of my shattered childhood, forced to grow up overnight in the most traumatic way possible. The morning of Saturday, the 12th of June 2006, started like any other day. We were heading to a family gathering. My mother bustled around the kitchen preparing a pasta salad to bring to Aunt Laura's house, while my father complained about the traffic we would face on the drive to Harrisburg. Jason was texting his friends, already bored by the prospect of spending the day with relatives. I sat quietly at the breakfast table, hoping to remain invisible and avoid becoming the target of my father's irritation. "Haley, go change your clothes," my mother said, eyeing my outfit. "Jeans and a simple blue t-shirt. That is not appropriate for a family gathering. Put on that dress I bought you last month." The dress in question was frilly and pink, something I would never choose for myself. "But Mom, it is just a casual barbecue." Aunt Laura said casual clothes were fine, I protested softly. My father looked up from his newspaper, his eyes narrowing. "Your mother told you to change. Why must you always argue about everything?" I swallowed my objections and went upstairs to change, blinking back tears of frustration. By the time I came back downstairs in the hated pink dress, everyone was already in the car waiting. My father honked the horn impatiently as I hurried out the front door. The car ride was tense from the start. My father tuned the radio to a news station while my mother reviewed my latest school progress report that had arrived in the mail the previous day. "A C+ in science, Haley." "What is this about?" she asked, waving the paper. "We had a substitute teacher for 2 weeks, and the test was on material he never covered." I explained, my voice small in the confined space of our sedan. "Excuses," my father interjected. Jason never made excuses for his grades. He took responsibility and did the extra work needed to succeed. Jason shifted uncomfortably in the seat beside me but said nothing. The conversation quickly devolved into a lecture about my lack of discipline, my failure to plan ahead, my apparent disinterest in my future. By the time we were halfway to Harrisburg, I had been informed of all the ways I was disappointing my parents and threatening my chances of getting into a good college, 5 years before I would even apply. We arrived at Aunt Laura's suburban home around noon. The forced smiles and performative hugs began immediately. "Oh, Stephanie, Derek, and Jason, my goodness, you get more handsome every time I see you," Aunt Laura gushed before her eyes landed on me. "Haley, well, at least you are wearing a pretty dress for once." The afternoon dragged on painfully. My cousins Beth and Kevin showed off their latest achievements, Beth's tennis trophies and Kevin's science fair medals. My Uncle Tom grilled my brother about his summer program, while my father beamed proudly. I sat on the edge of the gathering, picking at my food and trying to disappear into the background. Then came the moment that would change everything. I was carrying a glass of grape juice across Aunt Laura's pristine white-carpeted living room when my cousin Kevin rushed past me, bumping my arm. The dark purple liquid splashed across the carpet in a spreading stain that seemed to grow in slow motion before my horrified eyes. "Haley," Aunt Laura shrieked. "What have you done?" My mother rushed over with napkins while my father's face turned a dangerous shade of red. "I am so sorry," I stammered. Kevin bumped into me. "It was an accident." "Do not blame your cousin," my father growled, gripping my arm so tightly it hurt. Always making excuses, never taking responsibility. What followed was 20 minutes of public humiliation as I was made to scrub the carpet while everyone watched my father standing over me, listing all my faults and carelessness. By the time the worst of the stain was removed, my knees were sore, my hands were raw from the cleaning solution, and my cheeks were burning with shame. "We are leaving," my father announced abruptly. "Stephanie, get your purse. Jason, Haley in the car now." The goodbyes were rushed and awkward. I could feel Aunt Laura's disapproving stare burning into my back as we walked to the car. The silence as we pulled away from the house was suffocating thick with unspoken rage. About 15 minutes into our drive home, my father pulled into a gas station. "Need to fill up," he muttered, stepping out of the car. My mother went inside to use the restroom and Jason asked if he could buy a soda. Left alone in the car, I allowed myself to cry quietly, the events of the day overwhelming me. When my parents and brother returned, my father noticed my tears immediately. "Still feeling sorry for yourself," he snapped. "This self-pitying attitude of yours has got to stop." Something in me broke at that moment. "It was an accident," I said, my voice stronger than I intended. "And Kevin did bump into me. Why do you always assume everything is my fault? My father's face contorted with fury. Get out of the car, he ordered. What I asked, confused. Get out. You want to act like an adult and talk back. Then you can find your own way home like an adult. Time to woman up, Haley. I thought it was just another threat, just another power play to force my compliance. But then my mother said nothing in my defense, and Jason looked away, and suddenly I was standing in the gas station parking lot as my father started the engine. Dad, please, I begged, panic rising in my chest. I am sorry. Please do not leave me here. Maybe a little time to think about your attitude will do you good, he said coldly. Call us when you are ready to apologize properly. And then they drove away. I stood frozen in disbelief, watching our car disappear down the highway, certain they would turn around any second. But they did not come back. My own parents had abandoned me, a 13-year-old girl, at a gas station 60 miles from home as the sun was beginning to set. The reality of my situation hit me like a physical blow as I watched our family car disappear around the bend. I stood in the parking lot of Miller's Gas and Convenience for several minutes, convinced my parents would return, that this was just an extreme scare tactic. But as the minutes ticked by with no sign of them, panic began to set in. I reached into my pocket for my flip phone, only to remember that my father had confiscated it the previous week after I had texted a friend past my technology curfew of 8 p.m. I had exactly $12 in my other pocket, birthday money from my grandmother that I had been saving for a new sketchbook. The gas station was located on a rural stretch of highway surrounded by fields and woods with no other businesses or houses in sight. Inside, a bored-looking man in his 40s manned the register, barely glancing up from his magazine when I entered. Excuse me, I said, my voice shaking. My parents just left me here. Can I use your phone to call them? The attendant, whose name tag read Earl, looked at me skeptically. Phones for paying customers only, he said, turning back to his magazine. I placed $1 on the counter and repeated my request. With a sigh, he pushed a grimy cordless phone toward me. With trembling fingers, I dialed my home number first. No answer. Then my father's cell phone, straight to voicemail. My mother's phone rang and rang before disconnecting. Finally, I tried my brother's phone, hoping he might secretly help me. Hello, Jason, answered, his voice hushed. Jason, it's me, I said, relief flooding through me. Please come back and get me. I am scared. There was a pause before he responded. I cannot, Haley. Dad is furious. He says you need to learn a lesson. But it is getting dark. I do not know what to do. I was struggling not to cry now. Just call someone else. A friend's parent, maybe. I have to go before Dad realizes I am talking to you. And then he hung up. I stood there, holding the dead phone, betrayal and disbelief washing over me in waves. I tried my grandmother's number next, but there was no answer. I later learned she was at a church retreat that weekend with no cell service. Earl was watching me now, with a mixture of annoyance and reluctant concern. Look, kid, we close at 9. You cannot stay here all night. I do not have anywhere to go, I admitted, my voice small. My parents really left me here. I live 60 miles away. He scratched his stubbled chin. That is a tough break. Can you call a friend? I shook my head. Most of my friends lived in my neighborhood, and their parents would have to drive nearly 2 hours round trip to get me. Plus, I had memorized very few phone numbers. Who does in the age of contact lists stored in phones? Well, there is a police station in the next town over about 7 miles that way, Earl said, gesturing vaguely down the highway. Maybe they can help. 7 miles seemed walkable, so after buying a bottle of water and a granola bar with 3 of my precious dollars, I set out. The June evening was warm, but as the sun began to set, the temperature dropped. In my flimsy pink dress and sandals, I was soon shivering. Cars occasionally passed, but I had been warned my entire life never to hitchhike, so I kept walking, staying on the grassy shoulder. After about 2 miles, reality set in. It was nearly dark now, and I realized I would not reach the police station before night fell completely. The highway had no streetlights, and I was already developing blisters on my feet from walking in sandals not meant for hiking. With each passing minute, my situation felt more desperate. I turned back toward the gas station, hoping Earl might let me stay inside until morning. But when I arrived, the lights were off, and a closed sign hung in the window. It was just past 9 p.m. Behind the gas station was a small dumpster enclosure with a half wall of cinder blocks. It offered minimal shelter and concealment from the road. With no better options, I huddled there using my cardigan as a makeshift pillow against the hard ground. The smell was awful, rotting food and motor oil, but it was the only protected space available to me. That night was the longest of my life. Every sound startled me. The rustle of small animals in the nearby weeds, the occasional car passing on the highway, the distant rumble of trucks. I was cold, hungry, terrified, and overwhelmed with a bone-deep sense of abandonment. How could my own parents do this to me? What kind of people leave their 13-year-old child alone at night in an unfamiliar place? I cycled through emotions like a washing machine. Fear, anger, sadness, disbelief. I thought about the conditional nature of my parents' love, how quickly they could discard me when I failed to meet their expectations. I wondered if they were worried about me at all, or if they were sitting at home feeling justified in their lesson. Sometime around midnight, it began to rain. Not heavily, but enough that I had to press myself tightly against the cinder block wall to stay relatively dry. My pink dress, once the source of so much contention, was now dirty, damp, and providing almost no warmth. I hugged my knees to my chest and tried to make myself as small as possible, both physically and emotionally. In those dark hours, I made a decision. If I survived this night, and for the first time in my life, I truly wondered if I would never put myself in a position to be hurt by my parents again. I would find a way to live without them, to build a life where my worth was not determined by their impossible standards. As dawn approached, I must have dozed off briefly from sheer exhaustion. I woke to the sound of a car pulling into the gas station lot. It was just after 5 a.m., and the station would not open for another hour. But a woman was getting out of her car, a nurse finishing her night shift. I would later learn stopping for coffee on her way home. She noticed me immediately as I emerged from behind the dumpster, disheveled and tear-stained. "Oh my God, honey, are you okay?" she asked, rushing toward me. Her name was Elaine, and she would become the first link in a chain of people who would help me rebuild my life from the ashes of that terrible night. But in that moment, all I knew was that a kind stranger had found me. And for the first time in 12 hours, I felt a flicker of hope that I might find my way home. Not to the house where my parents lived, but to a true home where I would be valued and loved. Elaine's kind eyes widened with concern as I briefly explained my situation. Without hesitation, she ushered me into her car and cranked up the heat, though it was June. "You are shivering, sweetheart," she said, handing me her cardigan. It smelled like lavender and safety. "I am taking you to the police station," she said firmly. "What your parents did is not okay. It is child abandonment." The word abandonment hit me hard. Until she said it, I had been carrying the weight of blame, somehow convinced I deserved what had happened. Hearing it labeled correctly, as something wrong that had been done to me, not because of me, was the first step in a long healing process. The Riverside Police Station was small but welcoming. Officer Daniels, a woman with salt and pepper hair pulled into a tight bun, took my statement while I sipped hot chocolate. She frowned deeply as I recounted the events of the previous day. "We will contact your parents immediately," she said. Her tone made it clear she was not pleased with them. When the call went through, I could hear my father's voice on the other end of the line, loud and defensive. She was being disrespectful, teaching her responsibility. Planned to go back for her this morning. The excuses flowed freely. Officer Daniels was having none of it. "Sir, you left your 13-year-old daughter alone at a gas station 60 miles from home. She spent the night outdoors behind a dumpster. I could arrest you for child endangerment and abandonment right now. I suggest you get in your car immediately and come get her and be prepared for a visit from Child Protective Services." The drive from my town would take at least an hour, so I waited in the station's break room. Elaine insisted on staying with me until my parents arrived. "I have 3 daughters myself," she explained. "I would never leave you alone after what you have been through." When my parents finally walked into the police station, the contrast between their appearance and demeanor was jarring. They were clean, well-dressed, and projecting concerned parent energy that I had rarely experienced. My mother rushed toward me with outstretched arms, but I flinched away from her touch. Officer Daniels observed this reaction and stepped between us. "Mr. and Mrs. Turner, we need to have a serious conversation about what happened yesterday." What followed was 30 minutes of my parents attempting to minimize their actions, reframe the narrative, and shift blame. Haley has been increasingly difficult, testing boundaries. We just wanted to scare her a little. Never meant for her to stay there all night. The gaslighting might have worked if not for Officer Daniels and Elaine. I found her behind a dumpster, Elaine said firmly. A child, alone and terrified. Eventually, my parents were allowed to take me home, but not before Officer Daniels made it clear that a CPS investigation would follow. The car ride home was silent and tense. My father gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. My mother stared straight ahead occasionally, glancing back at me with an unreadable expression. Jason was not with them. When we arrived home, the attempted rewriting of history began immediately. "You know we were coming back for you," my father said, his tone somewhere between angry and defensive. "You are blowing this way out of proportion." "We were teaching you a lesson about respect," my mother added. "We drove around the block and were going to come right back, but then we saw you were gone from the gas station. We looked for you for hours." I knew it was a lie. If they had returned and found me missing, they would have called the police themselves. They would not have gone home and gone to bed while their child was missing. I said nothing, walking past them to my room, where I closed the door and called my grandmother. Through tears, I told her everything. "Pack a bag," she said without hesitation. "I am coming to get you right now." 2 hours later, my grandmother's ancient Buick pulled into our driveway. My parents tried to intervene as I walked out with my hastily packed suitcase. "Mom, you cannot just take her," my mother protested to her own mother. "We are her parents." My grandmother, typically soft-spoken and conciliatory, drew herself up to her full 5'3". "Parents do not abandon their children at gas stations, Stephanie. Haley is coming with me while you two figure out what kind of people you want to be." The relief of driving away from that house was indescribable. In my grandmother's apartment, I was given the spare bedroom, small but cozy, with shelves full of books and a desk where I could draw. "This is your home now," she told me, "for as long as you need it." The CPS investigation that followed was thorough. My parents were mandated to attend parenting classes and therapy. They made occasional efforts to see me. Awkward supervised visits filled with tense conversation and their poorly disguised frustration at being held accountable. The final breaking point came 3 months after the incident. During a visit at a neutral location, a family counseling center, my father finally showed his true colors again. "When are you going to get over this, Haley? We have apologized. We are jumping through all these hoops. What more do you want from us?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw clearly for the first time that he was never going to change. "I do not want anything from you anymore," I said quietly. "I am not coming back." My mother began to cry, but they were tears of frustration, not remorse. "This is ridiculous. We made one mistake." "It was not one mistake," I replied, finding strength I did not know I had. "It was years of making me feel worthless, followed by abandoning me when I needed you most. I am done." I walked out of that room at 14 years old, making the decision that many adults struggle to make, to cut toxic people out of my life, even when those people are family. My grandmother supported my decision completely. With her help, I filed for emancipation from my parents at 16, and it was granted based on the documented history of the abandonment incident and my established stability living with my grandmother. My parents made a few more attempts to contact me over the next year, but they were half-hearted at best. My father seemed almost relieved to be unburdened of a daughter who had never lived up to his expectations. My mother, always the follower, chose her marriage over her child. And just like that, my nuclear family was no longer a part of my life. But in its place, something new and beautiful began to grow. My grandmother became not just my guardian, but my champion, encouraging my art, celebrating my academic achievements, without demanding perfection, and showing me what unconditional love truly looked like. For the first time, I began to believe that perhaps I was not the problem after all. The transition from traumatized 13-year-old to confident young adult did not happen overnight. There were nightmares about being abandoned, panic attacks, when I found myself alone in unfamiliar places, and a deep-seated fear that anyone who claimed to love me might discard me if I failed to meet their expectations. But my grandmother Barbara was steadfast in her support. "Healing is not linear, sweetheart," she would remind me. Some days will be harder than others, but you are moving forward even when it does not feel like it. With her encouragement, I began seeing a therapist, Dr. Winters, who specialized in childhood trauma. Those weekly sessions became sacred space for unpacking the emotional baggage my parents had loaded onto my young shoulders. What happened to you was not your fault, Dr. Winters told me during one particularly difficult session. Children do not have to earn their parents' love and protection. Those should be freely given. High school brought its own challenges. Teenagers can be cruel, and word of my weird family situation spread quickly. There were whispers and stares in the hallways. That is the girl whose parents dumped her at a gas station, I would overhear, followed by speculative theories about what I must have done to deserve it. But adversity has a way of revealing who your true friends are. Sarah and Danielle stuck by me, defending me against gossip and including me in their family activities. Sarah's parents often invited me for dinner, and Danielle's mother taught me to drive when I got my learner's permit. These small acts of inclusion helped me understand that family could be chosen, not just determined by biology. My brother Jason and I maintained minimal contact. He was away at college by then, and our relationship was complicated by his role, or lack thereof, the night I was abandoned. Occasionally, he would call my grandmother's house to check on me. I should have done something, he admitted during one call when I was 16. I was afraid of Dad, but that is no excuse. You were just a kid too, I replied, though. Part of me still held on to the hurt of his betrayal. Academically, I threw myself into psychology courses, fascinated by the dynamics that had shaped my own family. Understanding the cycles of emotional abuse and the psychology of narcissistic parents helped me contextualize my experience. It was not just my family that was broken. There were recognizable patterns and systems at work. My art also evolved, becoming an outlet for processing trauma. My high school art teacher, Miss Franklin, encouraged me to apply to art therapy programs for college. You have a unique perspective, Haley, she said. Your work shows both pain and resilience. That could help others someday. When college acceptance letters began arriving during my senior year, my grandmother sat with me at her kitchen table as I opened each one. I had applied to schools with strong psychology programs, all within a few hours' drive of her apartment. Pennsylvania State University is offering you a partial scholarship, she noted, reading over my shoulder. That is wonderful, honey. I do not want to go too far away, I admitted. I would miss you too much. She squeezed my hand. I will be right here whenever you need me, but do not let fear of leaving hold you back. You are stronger than you know. I chose Penn State, close enough to visit my grandmother regularly, but far enough to establish my independence. College was transformative, a place where no one knew my history unless I chose to share it, where I could define myself by my present and future rather than my past. It was during my sophomore year that I met Thomas in a developmental psychology class. Tall, with kind eyes and a quiet confidence, he asked thoughtful questions and took notes in a journal rather than on a laptop. We were paired for a project on childhood resilience, a topic that resonated deeply with me. As we grew closer, I struggled with when and how to tell him about my family history. Would he see me differently once he knew? Would he think there must be something wrong with me for my own parents to have abandoned me? Finally, over coffee, one rainy afternoon, I shared my story. His reaction was everything I needed, not pity but understanding, not judgment but compassion. Thank you for trusting me with that, he said simply. It explains why you are so insightful about human behavior. You have lived what most of us only study. Our relationship developed slowly and thoughtfully. Thomas had his own family wounds, a father who had left when he was young, a mother who had struggled with depression. We recognized in each other a shared commitment to breaking cycles of hurt. By the time we graduated, we had built a foundation of trust that felt stronger than anything I had experienced before. When Thomas proposed during a weekend visit to my grandmother's apartment, asking for both our blessings, I knew I had found my true family. Throughout these years, my grandmother would occasionally update me on news of my parents gleaned from the limited family connections she maintained. My father had been passed over for a promotion at work. My mother had joined a new church. They had renovated the kitchen. These snippets of information felt like hearing about distant acquaintances rather than the people who had raised me for 13 years. My brother Jason graduated from college and took a job in Chicago, further distancing himself from our parents, though he never completely cut ties as I had done. We would exchange birthday cards and occasional emails, our relationship cordial, but never quite recapturing the closeness that might have been possible in a healthier family. The most difficult moment came when I was 24 and planning my wedding. The question of whether to invite my parents loomed large. "They are still your parents," Thomas said gently. "But this is your day, and you should be surrounded only by people who make you feel safe and loved." My grandmother, now using a walker but still sharp as ever, offered her wisdom. "Forgiveness does not mean you have to let them back into your life, Haley. It means releasing the power they have over your happiness." In the end, I sent them a simple announcement after the wedding had taken place. Not an invitation, but an acknowledgement. They sent a generic card and gift in return. It felt like the right distance, recognition without reconciliation. My career as a child psychologist, specialized in trauma recovery, brought its own form of healing. Each child I helped navigate their own difficult circumstances reinforced my belief that while we cannot choose what happens to us, we can choose how we respond and who we become in the aftermath. Thomas and I bought our first home, a cozy craftsman with a studio space where I could continue my art therapy work. We discussed having children with both excitement and trepidation. "I am afraid of making the same mistakes I confessed one night. What if there is some generational curse I cannot break?" "The fact that you are asking that question is exactly why you will be different," Thomas assured me. "You know what not to do because you lived it. And you have built a toolkit for what to do instead." When my grandmother passed away peacefully in her sleep at 87, it felt like losing a parent, the only real parent I had known. The funeral was small, but filled with people whose lives she had touched. My parents attended, standing awkwardly at the back of the room, more strangers than family. We acknowledged each other with nods, but did not speak. The chasm between us had grown too wide for casual conversation to bridge. In her will, my grandmother left me her apartment and a letter that read in part, "You saved me as much as I saved you, dear one. Before you came to live with me, I was just an old woman waiting for time to pass. You gave me purpose and joy. Never forget how much light you bring to this world." I was 30 years old, married, established in my career, and expecting my first child when the wedding invitation arrived from Jason. My brother, now 35, was finally getting married to his longtime girlfriend, Emma. And tucked inside the cream-colored envelope was a note from my parents that would upend the careful distance I had maintained for 17 years. The invitation itself was beautiful. Cream-colored cardstock with silver embossing announcing the wedding of Jason Turner and Emma Richardson. It had been nearly 2 years since I had last spoken to my brother, just a brief call on his birthday. Our relationship had settled into a pattern of occasional contact, civil but never close. But it was the separate note, handwritten on personal stationery, that made my hands shake as I read it. "Dear Haley, we know this is unexpected after so many years of silence. Not a day has passed that we have not thought of you and regretted our actions that night at the gas station. There are no excuses for what we did. We failed you completely as parents, not just that night, but for years before it. We have been in therapy separately and together, trying to understand how we could have treated our own daughters so terribly. The answers are not pretty. Generational trauma, narcissism, displaced ambition, but they are not meant as justifications. Jason tells us you have built a beautiful life. We are genuinely happy for you, though we take no credit for the remarkable woman you have become. If you are willing, we would very much like to see you at Jason's wedding. We understand if you decline. Either way, please know that we are truly sorry for the pain we caused you. With regret and hope, Derek and Stephanie Turner." I sat at our kitchen table, the letter trembling in my hands as Thomas came in from work. One look at my face told him something significant had happened. "What is it?" he asked, setting down his bag and coming to my side. I silently handed him the invitation and note. He read them carefully, his expression thoughtful. "What are you thinking?" he asked, always careful not to tell me how I should feel about my family. "I do not know," I admitted. "Part of me thinks this is 17 years too late. Another part wonders if people can really change that much. And a tiny part, the 13-year-old girl who just wanted her parents to love her, wants to believe them." That night, I barely slept, turning over possibilities in my mind. Would seeing my parents reopen old wounds? Would avoiding them mean giving them continued power over my choices? What did forgiveness look like in this situation? The next day, I called Dr. Winters, my former therapist who had become a trusted advisor over the years. Forgiveness and reconciliation are two different things, she reminded me. You can forgive them for your own peace, without allowing them back into your life. Or you can explore a new, very different relationship with clear boundaries. There is no single right answer here. I also reached out to Jason, something I had been meaning to do anyway, to congratulate him on his engagement. Our conversation was cautious at first, but as it progressed, I felt a willingness to be honest that had been missing in our adult relationship. "They really have changed, Haley," he said when I asked about our parents. "Dad had a health scare 4 years ago, a minor heart attack, and it seemed to break something open in him. He started therapy, joined a men's support group. Mom finally stood up to him and threatened divorce if he did not get help. They are not perfect, but they are not the same people who left you at that gas station." "Do you think they deserve another chance?" I asked. There was a long pause before Jason answered. "I think that is entirely up to you. You do not owe them anything, but I also think people can change when they do the work. And they have been doing the work." I discussed it extensively with Thomas, who had become my sounding board and safe harbor through every major decision in my adult life. "Whatever you decide, I am with you," he assured me. "If you want to see them, I will be right by your side. If you want to skip the wedding entirely, I will support that too." I considered declining the invitation, but sending a gift, avoiding the confrontation entirely. I considered attending, but keeping my distance from my parents, focusing solely on celebrating Jason's marriage. I considered meeting them beforehand in a neutral location with Thomas present to test the waters before committing to the more public wedding setting. In the end, I decided that I needed to face this chapter of my life directly. The gas station incident had shaped so much of who I had become, both the trauma and my response to it. Perhaps seeing my parents again, hearing their apology in person, would provide a kind of closure I had not realized I still needed. I wrote back to Jason, accepting the invitation, and then, after another sleepless night, composed a brief note to my parents. "I will be attending Jason's wedding with my husband Thomas. I am willing to meet with you briefly before the event. This does not mean I am ready for a relationship, but I am open to hearing what you have to say in person. Haley." Their response came quickly, grateful, respectful of my boundaries, and without the defensive tone that had characterized our last interactions years ago. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop in Philadelphia, where the wedding would take place the day before the ceremony. As the meeting date approached, my anxiety increased. I began having the old nightmares again, finding myself alone at the gas station, the darkness closing in, no one coming to help. Thomas would wake me, gently holding me, until my breathing steadied. "You are safe," he would whisper. "You are not alone anymore." I prepared for the meeting as I would for a professional confrontation, making notes about what I wanted to say and what boundaries I needed to establish. Thomas gently suggested I might be overthinking it. "Just be present," he advised. "See who they are now. Listen to what they have to say. You do not need to decide anything in the moment." The week before Jason's wedding, I found myself standing in front of my closet, obsessing over what to wear to meet my parents. Should I dress to impress them, to show how well I had done without them? Should I dress casually to show I did not care what they thought? The fact that I was even having these thoughts revealed how much power they still held in my psyche. "Wear something that makes you feel strong," Thomas suggested simply. I opted for a blue dress that reminded me of my grandmother. Classic, dignified, but comfortable. As we drove to Philadelphia, I rehearsed possible scenarios in my head. What if they had not really changed? What if they tried to minimize what had happened? What if seeing them triggered a panic attack? "Remember," Thomas said as we pulled into the hotel parking lot the night before the arranged meeting, "you are in control here. You can leave at any time. You do not owe them forgiveness or a relationship." That night, I called Jason from our hotel room. "Are you sure about this?" I asked him. "What if it creates drama that overshadows your wedding?" "Emma and I want you there," he assured me. "And honestly, Haley, I think this meeting is long overdue. Whatever happens, we will handle it together." His use of "we," including me and his family unit, was not lost on me. Perhaps there was a relationship worth salvaging there, even if things with our parents did not work out. As I finally drifted off to sleep, I realized that the 13-year-old girl who had slept behind a dumpster would never have imagined this moment, standing on the precipice of confronting the people who had abandoned her, not from a place of weakness or need, but from a position of strength and self-determination. Whatever happened the next day, I would be okay. I had built a life filled with love and purpose. I had become someone my younger self would be proud of. And now perhaps I was ready to close this painful chapter, not by forgetting, but by facing it directly and deciding for myself what role, if any, my parents would have in my future. The coffee shop we had agreed to meet at was busy enough to provide background noise, but quiet enough for conversation. Thomas and I arrived 15 minutes early, securing a corner table that offered some privacy. I fidgeted with my napkin, folding and unfolding it as we waited. "They are here," Thomas said quietly, squeezing my hand as he glanced toward the door. I looked up to see my parents for the first time in 17 years. The physical changes were striking. My father's hair had gone completely gray, and he had lost weight, making him appear smaller somehow. My mother's face showed new lines, and she moved more carefully as if uncertain of her welcome. They spotted us and hesitated before approaching, giving me a moment to compose myself. "Haley," my father said, his voice softer than I remembered. "Thank you for agreeing to see us." There was an awkward moment as they seemed unsure whether to attempt a hug. I stood but kept the table between us, extending my hand instead. "This is my husband, Thomas," I said, finding strength in his presence beside me. We sat, ordered coffee, and endured several minutes of painfully polite small talk about the weather and our drive to Philadelphia. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "We have rehearsed what to say to you 1,000 times, but now that we are here, nothing seems adequate," he began. "What we did to you was unforgivable. Not just that night at the gas station, but all the years before it, when we failed to love you as you deserved to be loved." My mother, who had always deferred to my father, spoke up. "We were terrible parents to you, Haley. I should have protected you, but I was too weak and too concerned with keeping the peace." I had expected to feel satisfaction at their admission, but instead I felt a strange emptiness. "Why?" I asked simply. "Why was I never good enough?" My father's eyes filled with tears, something I had never seen before. "It was never about you not being good enough. It was about me thinking I was not good enough." My father treated me the same way. Nothing was ever acceptable. Nothing ever measured up. "I thought being hard on you was preparing you for the world, but I was just passing on my own trauma." "That does not excuse what we did," my mother added quickly. "We have spent years in therapy understanding our actions, but understanding does not erase the harm we caused." As they continued to speak, something shifted in me. I had imagined this confrontation countless times, always picturing myself delivering a devastating speech that would make them realize the full extent of their cruelty. But sitting across from these aged, regretful people, I realized they already knew. No speech from me could make them feel worse than they already did. I built a good life. I told them, neither accusatory nor conciliatory. My grandmother showed me what unconditional love looks like. My husband supports me without trying to control me. I help children who have experienced trauma similar to what I went through. "Your grandmother was a remarkable woman," my father acknowledged. "She did what we should have done." "We saw your name in a psychology journal article last year," my mother added. "We have followed your career from a distance. We are so proud of you, though we have no right to be." I felt Thomas's reassuring presence beside me as I considered my next words carefully. "I did not come here to punish you or to absolve you. I came because I needed to see for myself if you had really changed, and because I did not want this unresolved history hanging over Jason's wedding." "That is more than fair," my father said. "We do not expect forgiveness. We just wanted you to know how deeply sorry we are and that we are trying to be better people now." We talked for nearly 2 hours, covering ground that had been left untouched for 17 years. They shared details of their therapy journey, how they had finally confronted their own toxic patterns. I told them select parts of my life, my education, my career, my marriage, while keeping certain aspects private. They respected my boundaries, never pushing for more than I was willing to share. As our meeting drew to a close, my mother hesitantly asked, Would it be possible to have some kind of relationship going forward, even just occasional emails or phone calls? I considered her question carefully. I do not know yet, I answered honestly. This is a lot to process. I am willing to take small steps, but I need time. We understand, my father said. Whatever you decide, we respect your choice. As we prepared to leave, my mother reached into her purse and pulled out a small package. This belongs to you, she said, handing it to me. We found it while cleaning out the attic last year. Inside was a small sketchbook from when I was 12, filled with drawings I had made and hidden away, afraid they would be criticized or confiscated. They had kept it all these years. Thank you, I said, genuinely touched by this unexpected connection to my younger self. We parted with tentative handshakes, an unspoken understanding that whatever came next would be on my terms and my time. The wedding the following day was beautiful. Jason and Emma had created a celebration that reflected their relationship, warm, inclusive, and joyful. I sat with Thomas on the bride's side of the aisle, a deliberate choice that Jason had suggested to minimize any awkwardness. During the reception, my parents kept a respectful distance, though my father nodded acknowledgement when our eyes met across the room. Jason found a moment to check in with me. How did it go yesterday, he asked. Better than I expected, I admitted. They seem different. They are, he confirmed. I would not have reconnected with them if they were still the same people. As the evening progressed, I found myself observing my parents. They danced together slowly, my father's hand gentle on my mother's back. They chatted warmly with Emma's family. They did not drink excessively or try to control the event as they once would have. They were indeed different people than the ones who had driven away from a gas station, leaving their daughter behind. By the end of the night, I had made my decision. I found them as they were preparing to leave. I am not ready for family holidays or regular phone calls, I told them directly, but I am willing to exchange emails occasionally. Small steps. The relief and gratitude in their expressions was genuine. Small steps is more than we hoped for, my father said. Thank you, Haley, my mother added, and congratulations on your pregnancy, Jason told us. You are going to be an incredible mother. I placed a protective hand over my small baby bump. Yes, I will, I said with quiet confidence. I have learned exactly what not to do. The drive home the next day felt lighter somehow. Thomas and I discussed the weekend's events, processing what had happened and what might come next. Are you okay with your decision, he asked. I think so, I replied. Forgiveness is not about excusing what they did. It is about freeing myself from carrying the weight of it every day. I can acknowledge they have changed while still protecting myself from potential harm. 3 months later, I received an email from my father. It was brief and respectful, sharing news of their lives without expectation. I waited a week before responding with an equally brief update about my work and preparations for the baby. Thus began a cautious, arm's-length relationship. Not the close parent-child bond that might have been, but a civil connection that acknowledged our shared history without being defined by it. When our daughter Claire was born, I sent them a photo and a short announcement. They responded with congratulations and a gift sent to our address, a set of children's books with no strings attached, no expectations of grandparent privileges. As I held my newborn daughter, I made her a silent promise. You will always know you are enough exactly as you are. Your worth will never be conditional on your achievements or behavior. You will never spend a night wondering if you are loved or if you belong. The journey from that terrified 13-year-old girl behind a dumpster to the woman and mother I am today was long and often painful. But each step, from my grandmother's unconditional love to therapy to building my own family, led me to a place of strength and peace I once thought impossible. My story is not one of perfect reconciliation or easy forgiveness. It is messier and more nuanced than that. It is about learning that healing does not require forgetting, that forgiveness does not demand reconciliation, and that family is defined by love and respect, not merely by blood. If you have experienced abandonment or conditional love, know that you are not defined by how others have treated you. You can build a life filled with genuine connection and set boundaries that protect your heart. The family you create, whether through blood, marriage, or friendship, can be built on a foundation of acceptance and unconditional love that may have been missing from your childhood. I would love to hear your thoughts on forgiveness and healing in the comments below. Have you had to make difficult decisions about toxic family relationships? What helped you move forward? Please like this video if my story resonated with you, subscribe for more stories of resilience and healing, and share with someone who might need to hear that they are not alone in their journey. Thank you for witnessing my story, and remember, your worth is inherent, not earned. Take care of yourselves and each other.